On this week's episode of the Going Commando podcast, we break down the Commanders' thrilling 17-16 victory over the Indianapolis Colts, get fans ready for Kirk Cousins' homecoming to FedEx Field for the very first time, and of course, break down everything regarding the possible sale of the franchise. So stick around, stay tuned, and let's get this show started. Welcome to Going Commando, a Washington Commanders podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Going Commando podcast. My name is Clark. I'm with my co-hosts Tom and Chris. And guys, Terry McLaurin is him.
Yeah, I say it every week. I'm going to die at the age of 40 of a stroke because of this team just giving me heart palpitations with these close wins. Great to see us pull out a win against the Colts. I was really worried about this game. I'm happy that we're able to get back to 500. We're in a tough division. Let's see if we can make it to playoffs.
Yeah, most certainly gritty, not pretty. There was definitely a lot of good things in this game and definitely some things that need to be corrected. So overall, super excited to get the win and to keep the streak going here. It was great to see and really hoping that the momentum can carry us into the next game and beyond, hopefully.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about how dirty this game is. I mean, Taylor Heineke putting up decent stats in a game where I thought listen. I don't like the guy, obviously, but I think that he definitely showed something this game that maybe Sam Howell would need to show to replace him. Now, do I think we replace him yet? No, he's won games. Let's let him just run this out. But we can't have these close wins like this. I want to see more dominant wins if we're going to be a serious team.
The Colts are a talented roster, despite the fact that they're starting Sam Ehlinger and, there's a lot of turmoil going on over in Indianapolis. They still have a lot of talented players. I still don't think that's a bad football team. And it was a close game, as a lot of us thought it was going to be headed into this week. You're right. It's not comforting to see us pull off, a come from behind win. Why couldn't we be leading by more? But at the same time, I mean, you've got to give credit where credit's due. Taylor Heineke just yossing one down the field. Terry McLaurin coming down with the catch of his life to set us up for the game-winning rush from Taylor Heineke. I mean, this guy just finds ways to win games. We're on a 3-game winning streak now. We battled all the way back to 4-4 after a 1-4 start. So say what you will, but a win is a win, and you can't take that away from the team.
Michael Pittman had a great game, bro. Like 7 receptions, 53 yards. I remember he was just like a safety valve almost. And then obviously you guys are talking about Paris Campbell. He was a guy that gave us a lot of issues, and it's weird because was he a teammate of Terry's at Ohio State?
He very well could have been, yeah.
He was. He absolutely was. Him, Curtis, and Terry all swapped jerseys after the game.
Yeah, and it was good to see him, healthy. I have nothing against the guy. I feel like he just hasn't played. And I think the Colts do have, somewhat of a playmaker in Campbell if he can stay healthy. Seem kind of like a Curtis Samuel type, kind of plug and play, just get him the ball in space kind of guy.
Yeah, he looked good. I mean, like I might have mentioned, he had that really nice 28, 30-yard kind of jet sweep run, made our kind of run defense look really bad there. So I was impressed with what Ehlinger was able to do with the tools that he had, and just given his overall inexperience. It was kind of interesting to see two more like long standing starters in Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz both sitting on their respective benches with their lesser known kind of wily backups in the mix. So I thought that was interesting to see as well.
Oh, no doubt. It was very fun matchup, very fun QB matchup. You weren't really sure what you were going to get out of it. The one thing that I found interesting as well, kind of going off of that point of maybe some not as big names being the deciding factors in this one. That absolutely is the case because Jonathan Taylor, one of the biggest names on either side of the football in that game, was relatively quiet and, of course, had a crucial fumble as they're approaching scoring territory. He hasn't been himself this season, and we were able to contain him, which was something that obviously going in thought was going to be a struggle. But that front seven, not just talking about our defensive line, but our linebackers, especially Jamin Davis, they came to play on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think you really look at Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne in this game getting a sack each, and they're really big pieces to this defense. I think that when you talk about guys that you have to pay in the long term, these are the guys that you look at. And it's great to see them have production, and that really was the key to stopping Jonathan Taylor, was getting the front four to really apply pressure and then having linebackers make the tackle downfield. Great game. I it's hard to say that when it's this close, but the defense played very well, and I think that ultimately our offense just needs to produce at a higher level to match the defensive production.
I agree with you, Clark. I think that we saw some really solid play out of Jamin Davis. He had that one really critical kind of goal line stop for us that was, super kind of really jolted the team and definitely, created some momentum there. So that was awesome to see. John Ridgeway kind of filling in as that kind of rotational guy on the interior, because I know we've been kind of banged up there. He looked all right, so I was a little skeptical of him, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. And David Mayo, as we mentioned, Cole Holcomb out this week and hopefully back for next week. But with him out, our boy David Mayo had to step up, and he actually wasn't awful. He had a pass deflection early on, I remember, and I can't remember him really being too much of a liability for us. I may be forgetting some things, but wasn't completely disappointed with his play. Saw Bostic back on the field for a couple plays as well. So agreed that the front seven looked all right. And then got to obviously give credit to DeForest knocking that ball out of Jonathan Taylor's hands with his helmet. That was a critical, fumble recovery to kind of bail us out there for sure. So I thought the defense started to fall apart a little bit towards the end of the third, but showed grit and was able to, kind of force that field goal, a little bit later in the game as well. So, I'll give the defense the benefit of the doubt, kind of like I mentioned on this game, and it was really a bend but don't break, in my opinion, kind of defensive game for us.
Yeah, I completely agree, Chris. At times the defense, it shows these flashes. At times, you'll have the lapses, like kind of a end around play to Paris Campbell or, Alec Pierce catch here and there sprinkled in. But really, I was very excited about the play of Jamin Davis. It seems like the last few weeks, he's kind of finally seems to be breaking through in a way. And he's starting to play at a level that, we drafted him to play at. And I think that's really exciting, especially in a game with an absence of Cole Holcomb, seeing him step up in those big moments and, making the crucial stops when he's asked to, and kind of be that middle linebacker that, we so desperately need him to become. I really am liking what I've been seeing out of him the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I totally agree. Another guy I think that's been stepping up a lot is actually Benjamin St-Juste. I mean, I think he's been really playing very well since his shift to the outside. And as I'm sure you guys saw, we shipped out William Jackson III for a late, I think it was like 2024 or 2025 late round pick swap. Basically got nothing for the guy other than unloading his contract and freeing up a roster spot. But I think it was the right move. I think we've seen that St-Juste is better than William Jackson. I don't think, Rivera kind of talked about it after the move was made, and I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this as well. But it really seemed like it came down to Rivera kind of in a nice way saying that he couldn't understand their concept. Our zone kind of option concepts were too complicated for the guy, and he's purely a man corner. And although very athletic and a gifted athlete, just wasn't a good fit for our our scheme, and I totally agree with that. He never seemed to really even know where he was supposed to be on the field. I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that move, though, because it was the only one we made.
Yeah, I think when you look at William Jackson in his career, he's a man-to-man guy, like you said, and we don't run that. We run zone blitz schemes. So he would need to play a much more mentally challenging game, and that's true across all positions. I mean, when you run a zone scheme, it's very hard for those players to understand who the coverage is, and it's really about making those split decisions. And I don't think that's Will Jack's game. Now, obviously, a name that I think we should talk about really quickly is Rashad Wildgoose, because he's being thrown in there in replacement of Will Jack, honestly, and he's played all right. He's been doing well enough to stay on the field. And I think when you talk about Rivera, he's a very like player centric guy, and showing that he trusts guys like Rashad Wildgoose, who I think when he got signed, we all didn't think that he was going to be playing this much. Now, is that because of Will Jack not liking the system? Possibly. But is there a trust there from Rivera? Absolutely, because otherwise he would be pushing Will Jack back. But that's my response. I think Will Jack just didn't understand the system, and I think it's better that he moves on to a place that he feels more comfortable.
Yeah, let him go to Pittsburgh. They historically run a pretty tight ship defensively. They've always had good defenses, I feel, throughout the years. So if he fits their system and the Steelers coaching staff wanted to trade for him, have at it. We didn't really get too much in return compensation wise, but really I think that the whole key to this is just freeing up that cap space, which was a hefty hit over the next 2 seasons. So for a guy that wasn't able to play for us due to his level of play, and just freeing up that cap space, even if Will Jack plays well for the Steelers, or we swap conditional picks with them, I think regardless, I don't think you can say that we would lose this trade, just based purely off the fact that obviously he wasn't a right fit with us, and that cap space is looking pretty nice for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I'm actually more confident with, obviously Fuller still on the field, but having St. Juice, on the outside now, and then Rashad Wildgoose in the slot. I'm more comfortable with those three than I am, I think, at all with William Jackson when he's on the field. So I'm very pleased with the move. I was worried that we were just going to have to end up cutting him and that we wouldn't have a trade partner or trade suitor, right? And then we wouldn't get no value from it. So I'm happy to at least get a little something out of it. And like you said, yeah, hopefully it's best for both parties.
Well, one more thing to talk about with the cap space. We have 7 million currently, and next year we're only slated to have 15 million. Now that's not a lot, and we have to re-sign a lot of guys. And you look at a team like Chicago, where they have $114 million next year, which is like an insane amount of money in the modern day, especially with free agency. That easily gets you 3-star guys. So I think the cap space removal there was extremely important for us. Now, do we have to do more of that moving forward? Yes, I think so. But I'm not sure if that's to re-sign guys or to make moves on other guys. You know what I mean?
Well, depending on how the rest of the season goes, there's a certain guy named Wentz that takes up quite a bit of our cap space. It'll be interesting to see how that whole
see about
situation unfolds.
Yeah.
Well, if we paid him out, would that allow us to free up cap space, or would we have to trade him?
Well, I guess maybe it depends who buys the team. Are they willing to cash out some dollars? Or maybe we get a little Jeff Bezos action? I'm sure he has enough money to buy him out.
I was under the impression we're not necessarily on the hook for Carson for any guaranteed money beyond this season. I could be wrong.
I think
though.
it's dependent on the snap count, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that the 60% thing?
That
Clark?
is whether or not we have to give up a 2nd round pick or a 3rd round pick to the Colts. If he plays over 70, it's a 2nd round pick. If he plays under that mark, it's a 3rd round pick.
At this rate, I'd be okay with him playing under 70. As long as we keep winning with my boy Heineke, Tom, I know you think otherwise, but as long as we keep winning with him, let's keep it running.
Well, I think winning with Heineke is important when we look forward to the future in the next few games because it's an interesting schedule. I mean, we have the Vikings next, which is an extremely tough game, but after that we move on to an interesting few games. So this is really just a game where, hey, if we win it, it's a great win, but otherwise, I mean, I think I see this as a loss. How do you guys see it?
To be optimistic here and say it's a win just because I think we got the momentum. Kirk, I'm gonna bet on him choking, for his little homecoming game here. And yeah, I think that the team has really rallied these past 2 weeks. I know the wins have been ugly, and not necessarily by a wide margin by any means, but I'm looking forward to it. I think one key here, kind of key to this game is going to be the O-line play. We've had, I think I saw a statistic. We've had more starting offensive line combinations this year than any other team, and I think we've had 7 or 8. For instance, just last game, you had Trey Turner back in the starting lineup at right guard for whatever reason, Cosme out. So you had Corin Lucas over there on the right side, and then you had Tyler Larson, who's back in the mix now at center. So it's really, I thought that combination was maybe better than the week prior. Corin Lucas looked a little sus, so I hope we get Cosme back in the mix and he can go back to the swing tackle role. But yeah, I think if the O-line can keep Heineke protected and give him just a little bit of time, I think we'll have a shot. And if the defense, of course, needs to keep playing well.
I do agree in the fact that I think we actually have a shot in this game, and it might be closer than a lot of people might be saying. Obviously, you look at Minnesota, they only have one loss on the season. They've been a good team, but then you also look at the scores, the games they've been playing. They've been in some close matchups, and some of those close matchups came with, so to speak, inferior opponents. A 3-point win over the Saints, a 7-point win over the Bears, 4 points against the Lions. So I wouldn't be super sold on this team. Obviously, their offense and some of those weapons on offense really stand out at you. Of course, they actually just traded for TJ Hawkinson from the Detroit Lions to give them yet another good piece on offense. And so I really think that obviously you have to look out for those offensive weapons, but like you said, the offensive line will be key because staying in this game with them is going to come down to our offense needing to make plays at the right times to try to keep up with the Vikings.
Well, it's also important to note that these guys are absolute monsters defensively. I mean, Zadarius Smith leads this team with 8.5 sacks. Daniil Hunter's right behind him. Multiple tackles for loss defensively. So this is a defense that's really ready to play. You also have at cornerback Patrick Peterson playing against Terry McLaurin. That's going to be a very interesting matchup. That could be a game that makes Terry McLaurin as a player in this league. If he has a career game against Patrick Peterson, that would be amazing. But it's a tough defense, man, and you got to own up to it. You got to fricking just hammer hits the nail. That's all it is.
Another thing to consider is that FedEx Field is going to be absolutely rocking next week, especially given, of course, the news, which we're going to get into later in regards to the potential sale of the team. You saw what fans were coming out in full force against Green Bay, getting very active in the stands. I think for this game, combined with the fact that number one, it's Kirk Cousins coming back to Washington for the first time ever. Plus, all of the fans are all juiced up about the recent news and the vibes are immaculate. People are very excited right now for Washington football. So I don't know. It could be a tough game for Kirk Cousins in his homecoming. I think that the fans are going to be out and in full force.
Yeah, and isn't Patrick Peterson like 33, 34 by now? Like, I think Terry's gonna burn his ass. Like, I mean, is he even their top corner? I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but I just think, I think that Terry, I wouldn't be worried about Terry not being able to handle Patrick Peterson. I think Curtis Samuel has been looking great with or without Jahan Dotson. I think this offense has been firing on maybe not all cylinders, but definitely over 75% capacity, I'd say. I think Gibson, has been looking extremely dynamic these past couple of weeks. And so if everyone can just keep complimenting each other and we can kind of keep the ball moving, keep the chains moving, down the field as we've been, able to for the most part of these last couple of weeks, I think we'll have a shot.
Yeah, I wouldn't look too much into the Patrick Peterson talk. I think, he's definitely still a good player. He starts. He's not at the top of his game, but you saw what happened last time Terry went up against a former All-Pro corner, former Defensive Player of the Year, that is, and Stephon Gilmore. Of course, that was the guy that was guarding him on that just you got mossed play at the end of the game from Heineke throwing it up to him and Terry coming down at the 1 yard line. So yeah, he's been doing it consistently this season against some top corners. So I think that no matter who he's matched up against, Terry McLaurin gives you that deep threat down the field.
Well, I mean, Pat Peterson is definitely a guy. Don't forget. I mean, he has 10 passes defended on the year. He has an interception. This is a defense that has not forced a lot of turnovers through the passing game. I mean, other than Pat Peterson, it is 2 safeties and Harrison Smith who have interceptions as well as a linebacker. So it'll be an interesting game. I think it's a tougher game than you two realize.
I think that one area of concern that I think we should be worried about is actually the TJ Hawkinson addition, that rare interdivisional trade that happened up there. I think we really need Cole Holcomb back because I don't necessarily say I trust our linebackers without Cole Holcomb, even maybe saying with him to be able to, cover a dynamic kind of vertical threat, pass catching threat in TJ Hawkinson. Not sure, if those guys will be paired up with him all the time. Absolutely, most likely not, right? But I think that's one area that we need to make sure we're ready for.
Absolutely. I mean, you look left and right, you got weapons for Kirk Cousins. I mean, obviously the new addition, Justin Jefferson, of course, one of the best in the game. Thielen, still reliable. And then they have a solid ground attack too. I mean, of course, Dalvin Cook, one of the better backs in the league for, several years now. Madison is a nice compliment to him when he goes down or is taken out of the game at times. So yeah, really everywhere you look on this offense, there's a lot of weapons for Kirk Cousins. It just all comes down to him making the plays. And thus far on the season, they've been doing a pretty good job, maybe not turning the ball over as much and, getting the ball to your playmakers and letting them try to carry your team to victory.
There's also another homecoming here that I don't believe has happened yet as well. Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. It will be, I believe, especially if it's Kirk's first time back, it definitely is Kevin O'Connell's first time back in that case as well. So be interesting to have him back in FedEx and kind of see the crowd reaction there as well. Can't believe I almost let that slip my mind as well.
Yeah, just another former coordinator turned into a supposed young
Successful head coach.
successful offensive mastermind. It seems to just always happen to this franchise. I don't know, maybe Spin Zone, we have a little bit of a dynasty cooking in Washington of a breeding ground for elite young offensive coaches. So there's the feather in our cap, I guess, for that situation.
If only they could stay.
Well, it's a really important thing too, because think about that. That defines your fandom of this team. If you are a fan, we see the talent in these guys, and then we don't hold on to them because we don't spend enough money or whatsoever it be. And this is what happens to us every time. I mean, obviously, I think all of us right now would give up every player on the team if we could get Sean McVay back as our head coach. I mean, that's just my opinion. I'd love to have Sean McVay back. I would even take Matt LaFleur. I mean, talk about all these guys Mike McDaniel.
Yep.
There's all these guys that I think we would give our entire team up for that, we just have bred into the game. And it's weird. I just hope that we can find some sort of consistency in the future. Maybe what we should do, honestly, is just hire our offensive coordinators as head coach. Now, obviously, I don't agree with that right now with Scott Turner, but it's a thought, certainly.
Yeah, maybe not this particular time. I don't view Scott Turner as a young, spry offensive mastermind. He's gonna have to put together some good drives in the next couple of weeks, especially against a Vikings team that boasts so many weapons on offense.
And one last thing, I think if we're going to look towards a new head coach in the future and we're going to hire from guys that are in our, staff that are obviously being bred into the game currently, maybe we hire Ryan Kerrigan. I mean, just a guy that has been with the team and knows the system well and just knows the team and can really change and create the culture that I think would be beneficial to our franchise.
Who knows? I love RK, love HBK. One of my favorite players to this day. So who knows? I definitely think he wants to get his feet under him and a little bit, more experience under his belt before he maybe takes that much of a leap. But yeah, hey, you never know, and wouldn't be opposed.
So moving on from the Vikings game, there's of course some rather large news coming out of Washington that needs to be addressed. And if you're a fan of this team, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Of course, it was reported that Dan and Tanya Snyder would be hiring Bank of America to explore a potential sale of the team. Now, we don't know whether or not this means that they're looking to sell their entire stake of the team, or are they looking to sell off a portion in some minority ownership. As we know that Dan Snyder bought up a bunch of that minority ownership around the time of the name change when he was losing sponsors and losing some of the guys behind the scenes. So maybe they want to just divulge some of their assets a little bit, or perhaps Christmas has come early for Washington fans. And then coupled with that, of course, was the news that there's a federal investigation into the club for the over the financial improprieties that they have been accused of. So a lot is happening right now. A lot of things, dominoes are falling into place. I even saw a report today that Jeff Bezos and Jay-Z are potential interested buyers of the team. Of course, that's just all noise for now. We don't exactly know what is going to happen, but nonetheless, big news.
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of noise about this right now. And don't get me wrong, I was very happy to see this news. And I think, it's not crazy to think that those two instances of the news of the federal investigation and then, same day, looking to kind of make announcements that they're interested in selling the team or at least exploring what their options might be. I don't think those two are necessarily unrelated, right? I think that maybe Snyder has been finally caught red-handed and he knows it. And so that's why he's finally, kind of changed his stance, so to speak, on selling. That's what I hope is the case. But I'm sure we'll learn more as, we continue to hear more coming out of Washington on this. As for the potential suitors of who might buy the team, I wouldn't read too much into that yet. I know Bezos's name has been thrown around in the past, as well as a couple other big financial moguls out there who are always looking to purchase a team when it comes up. I even saw RG3, our old friend, making some waves on social media saying that he wants to be a minority owner in the team and it was going to take some fans with him along for the ride. So that's probably just him blowing smoke for some media attention, but I mean, hey, even he's thrown his name in the ring. So I am very interested to see how this continues to unfold over the next several weeks and rest of the season. And who knows, fellas, maybe this time next year we'll be under new ownership and it'll be a new era for us.
Well, I think it's important that we talk about the price tag. I mean, the Broncos sold for 4.65 billion. Now, obviously, people would say that we are a less valuable franchise, but that's actually wrong. The DC market and the NFC East is extremely valuable for TV. And Bezos has a lot of ties to the DC area. I think if I was a fan, that was thinking about a new owner, which I'm not because I'm currently believing that Dan Snyder probably will not sell the team just because I know that he hates the fans that much. Uh, I think that Bezos is the most reasonable guy. I mean, he owns the Washington Post. He stepped down from being the CEO of Amazon, so that's not a conflict of interest. He has the money to put up a $5 to $7 billion offer, which is the range that people are talking about. I don't see anyone else really having the capital to really buy this team and turn it into what it needs to be in order for it to be valuable enough to get your money back on. Now, obviously, when you talk about Dan Snyder, I think it's important that we talk about his history. I mean, let's talk about that early days. The 99 sale from Jack Kent Cook. I mean, you guys obviously, and me as well. I think our first exposure to Jack Kent Cook as like a portrayal is the Lakers documentary that came out recently on HBO, correct?
I don't think I'm familiar with the documentary, but I am familiar a little bit with the Jack Kent Cook kind of history and his family. Obviously, his son tried to buy the team at the time it was up for auction, and it was outbid by Daniel Snyder. And his business, Snyder Communications at the time. So I'm not familiar with that Lakers documentary you're referring to, but yeah, that was a sad time for this franchise. We didn't really know it maybe fully at the time what we were getting into with the Snyder era, but every era comes to an end. So I'm hoping that it's this one, hoping that the time is now. And again, would love to see some new ownership. Frankly don't really care who it is. I just want someone other than Snyder in there.
So the Washington Commanders franchise is valued at 5.6 billion, which is over 1 billion more than what the Denver Broncos recently sold for. So if that's the value of our franchise, you got to assume that the sale could be even more than that. And it would be by far the largest sale for any sports team ever, let alone NFL. If the entire team is sold, it would be the largest sale in the history of sports. So you're gonna need either someone that has just that kind of money, which isn't many. That's why Bezos' name obviously is floating around, but it could be an ownership group that would come up with that kind of deal, because it really is, it's going to be the biggest deal in the history of sports.
Yeah, unfortunately, even if I win the Powerball here this weekend, it won't even be nearly enough to even throw my name in the ring there. A couple of my friends and I were joking when we were buying some tickets, because it's a huge, one of the biggest pots of all time right now. But it's crazy to think that even winning the Powerball mega lottery won't even get you close to what it would take to buy that team.
Hey, well, maybe you get in contact with some folks upstairs and try to get a plan together, once you win that Powerball, ultimately, little ownership group, perhaps.
Maybe we could all win different state lotteries and pool our money. But a question I do have for you guys is, what do you think about the Dan Snyder legacy? What do you think it will be if he does sell the team and this is the end of the era?
I think it's a black mark on the franchise overall. I think obviously there's good times we had, and there's players that I grew up with and cherish the memories of, and will continue to be some of my favorite players, forever. But I think if you're looking at the franchise from a timeline from in 1932 to now, the Snyder era is going to be one of the darkest, most infamous eras of the team. We'll be curious to see, if and when we get new ownership, what's really changed, because someone coming in is going to want to basically clean house yet again, almost, as it seems, of everything that Snyder's put his hands on. Maybe we'll even have another rebrand. Bezos comes in and all of a sudden we're the Washington Prime. Who knows? But I to answer your question, Tom, I think it's a black mark.
It's strange to me that there is a realistic chance that Dan Snyder won't be the owner, because our whole lives, that's been this team. It's been Dan Snyder. It's been fans complaining about Dan Snyder. So really, my thing that I'm looking forward to, hopefully, if this happens, is just the overall kind of vibe with the fan base. how many people are going to come back to rooting for this team? How many new fans are we going to gain from, Snyder's reign potentially finally being over? Is there going to be a sense of optimism amongst fans? Because generally speaking, there really hasn't been for the better part of, 20 years. Our parents' generation growing up, the town of Washington, city of Washington was crazy for the Redskins. They sold out every game at RFK. They were the talk of the town, but now it just seems like, DC being, kind of like a transplant city for a lot of people. It seems like, I hate to say this as someone who's born and raised there, but it seems like we're almost not a great sports town as opposed to, hate to say this, but even Philly, they are a great sports town. You have to give credit where credit's due. I think that this move could really have a ripple effect on all of DC sports.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about the ripple effect, I mean, you have to talk about the franchise's ripple effect too. I mean, would a new owner just clear out the house and just start from the ground up? I mean, I think that this is a team that has a good amount of talent on it. Now, obviously, coaching wise, I'm not sure who you would keep and who you'd want to move on from if you were a new owner, and I'm not sure what the owner would want to do, especially in a new year. But I think that change is definitely coming in the sports arena in DC, especially when you talk about the new stadium that would have to be built by this owner and the commitment that would have to be made to that and the cost of that. And I think the real question that I would have for you boys is, do you think that there's any reason we would keep the coaching staff, or do you think they're all gone if we get a new owner?
That's an interesting question because I think when you take a look at Ron Rivera, he's done a lot of good things for this organization in terms of image. And I think he is a guy that the players do respect. Now, if anyone here has listened to some of the early episodes this season, am I frustrated with some of his, coaching brain farts and kind of, lack of just prowess in key situations and decision making? Yes. But I think he's a tough coach to get rid of given everything that this franchise has gone through and what he kind of represents. So I don't know. I think you definitely might see, with new ownership, of course, you will see movement in the back office. Of course, you'll see some movement along the staff. I don't know if there'd be a head coach change right away. I think a lot of that also might depend on how this season kind of shakes out for the rest of the year.
I know that if ownership stays the same, that this coaching staff is still going to be here. And if I had to guess, I would say that a sale is not going to happen in the matter of seconds, in the matter of weeks, even a month from now. I don't think that you see these teams sold until the off season. So going into the off season, depending on how obviously we don't know how the season's going to finish, we're clearly a few games behind in our division, but at 4-4, really the season is completely ahead of us right now. So I think it definitely depends on like how we finish. And even if it's a underwhelming finish and results to this season, I still think that you could see this coaching staff come back because there might not be certainty in the front office and ownership at that time. And I believe they're still under contract. So I would not be shocked to see the coaching staff stick around even through an ownership change.
Yeah, and I don't really think that you do keep them, but I certainly think that the moves that they've made recently would merit their keeping. I mean, Chase Young is obviously back this weekend, and he's a big piece of our team, and I think if you clean house, you really kind of disrupt his development, and you have him start over with new coordinators and all this and that. Now, obviously, I think you also got to talk about the future of this team. I mean, we really need to start building a contender soon. Otherwise, what are we doing with all this talent? Because I truly do believe, if we find a franchise quarterback and we get maybe one more receiver and some defensive backup or at least a little bit more depth, I think that we're definitely talking about a playoff team. And I'm, hoping that that happens with regime change. No, I'm just, is there a little bit of sadness in me in seeing Snyder leave? Honestly, a little bit, yeah, because he was the owner for all those years, and I know the players from those years, and they're very, some of them don't like the team, some of them love their time with the team. So it's a little sad, but I'm hopeful for a new future with the new owner.
Well, that about does it for this week's episode of the Going Commando podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back with another episode following our matchup on Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings, and maybe we'll even have some more news regarding the ownership front. Nonetheless, thanks for tuning in, and as always, HTTR and HTTC.